another edition of SNYDER'S STOUGHTON. My name is Mark Snyder. We have a fun show today for you. There's some really interesting guests today. We have an author on the show. This is the book. It's called My Body, Their Baby. And her name is Laurie Miller. She's here with her publisher, Mike Pizarro, he's been on before because he published Charlie Atana's book, and he's also the veterans agent. He wears a lot of hats. He's wearing his publisher hat today. And then in the second segment, we're going to talk, because he's going to switch his hats to his veterans hat, and we're going to actually talk about the Home for the Brave program. And we actually have some very distinguished guests here. Thomas Drummy, he's the president and CEO of Randolph Savings Bank, is here with us today. Paulette Saggio, who's a senior mortgage executive at Randolph Savings Bank, and Christopher Layton of Layton Real Estate. All of them are involved in this program, Home for the Brave. We'll tell you about that. And we'll also talk about the mortgage situation in this country, which has precipitated this huge drop in the stock market and in the economy. We'll talk about that a little later on. But let's say hello right now to our first guests, Laurie Miller and Mike. How are you?
Hi.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
This is, now I got to tell you, when I was told that the book was about surrogacy, it didn't really strike a chord inside me. It's not really something I would even think about reading. But the book was fascinating, and actually I read it in 2 days, and it's a very well written book and a very interesting story. And I had so many questions after I read it that came streaming out, as I'm sure you did after you probably wrote it. I guess the most obvious one, tell us first of all, folks that are watching, the story about the book, how you wrote it, about the young lady that you met in camp, and how that evolved into you becoming a surrogate for her and making that offer.
Well, we met when I was 16 and she was 17, and we just developed a lifelong friendship. And years later, she had cystic fibrosis. Do you know anything about cystic fibrosis?
I do.
Okay, she had that, and she was trying to get pregnant, and I offered to have it for her.
When you did that, when you made that offer, was it just something that came out of your mouth, or were you actually something you thought about for a while?
No, it came out of my mouth.
Yeah, because there's so many avenues to that, and so many things that are involved in it. When you say that, it sounds so simplistic, but it was not simplistic.
Well, it was pretty simplistic because I didn't even know if I could do it. I mean, at that time, all I knew was one type of surrogacy, which is, Mary Beth Whitehead type surrogacy. Do you know anything about that case? It was a very famous case in New Jersey. Well,
you can tell us about that. It doesn't matter if I know about it, so everybody watching.
Well, that case involved a biological surrogate. It was her egg, and it was his sperm. I was just a gestational surrogate, which means that it wasn't the child was not biologically mine. Mm-hmm. So it was biologically theirs, and I just was the carrier. So I didn't even know that was, medically possible at the time that I said, I'll have it, Mm-hmm. So I was actually thinking of, offering the egg, but we actually did it the other way, so gestationally.
Well, one of the problems with cystic fibrosis is that she really couldn't carry the baby.
Well, we didn't know if she could carry the baby. I mean, I think that, their doctor kept on saying you could, but, I think the thought at that time was that she would have been so weakened at that point that she might not have survived it. Mm. If she could have gotten pregnant, she probably could have physically carried it, but what she would have been left like afterwards is, probably up for, discussion, which is, her health was just at risk at that point.
There's a number of elements in this book. There's your own relationship with your husband and your 2 children at the time, who were little.
Yes.
Going through this thing, and there was the woman that you were doing this for and her husband. There was a best friend of yours who was taking care of your children quite a bit, and the whole thing is just it's a very interesting mix. But tell us a little bit about the practicality of the whole thing. Once you decided you were going to do this, did your friend believe it initially? Did she say, "Oh, are you sure?" And tell us what you had to do, because I read the book of all the things you had to do. It wasn't just like, okay, I want to, just put the egg and then put the embryo and whatever, and we're all
get a turkey baster and you're done. Yeah,
exactly. It wasn't that at all.
Well, first of all, it was very difficult logistically because she was not close to me geographically. So that played a whole huge role in it, and it was 13 years ago, and there was no internet as far as research, or everything was done by the phone. I was going to the library. I mean, who goes to the library anymore to do research? You just don't do that anymore. So, it's funny now looking back at it and seeing that context of how I actually did this, because I probably could have done the research in an hour, but it took us, months to figure out, where we could do it, how we could do it. We ended up researching different IVF clinics, and I ended up going to an IVF clinic where she lived. and doing it there. So again, logistically, geographically, she was about 700 to 800 miles away from me. So it was kind of hard from that respect, and that's why my friend Joanne was taking care of my kids all the time, and I was flying up and back and tests and that kind of stuff. So logistically, if nothing else, without relationships, it was just very, very difficult.
Before we go on, I just wanted to talk to Mike for a second, because you've published a number of books now. One of them, in fact, we have a couple of them here. This one's a big seller, Codfish, Dogfish, Mermaids, and Frank, Coming of Age on the Open Ocean by Skip DeBresque, which I've seen on the bestseller list here in the Patriot Ledger quite a bit. You have My Son's War, Charlie Atanis, and this book right here. What was it about this, the presentation, the idea, that interested you in terms of being a publisher of a book like this? Because for me, someone saying to me, "Oh, I'm going to be a surrogate for a friend," yeah, it's interesting, but I'm not sure about a book.
You're a guy, though, so.
I am a guy. Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, being a guy, I had a lot of questions for her, like why she went through it. I don't want to give away any parts of the book, but in reading it, it's a very unusual story. It has a lot of twists and turns in it. It has a lot of good sub-themes in it. One of the things you did mention was the whole sub-theme with her brother in there.
Well, I was going to mention it.
A fascinating part of the book, how that thing all developed. But, with all the sub-themes and how the story actually ended and what transpired from the beginning to the end, it's just a fascinating story. It's not a typical surrogate story.
No.
I'd say that for sure. So that's what interested me in it.
And you're right, that is one of the themes that I had written down here that I forgot to mention. In fact, if you look at the cover, and maybe we can zoom in on this thing a little bit, on this camera over here. If you look at the cover, you'll see a jigsaw pattern on the book. And when I was first looking at it, it didn't make any sense. Why would they have that jigsaw puzzle on it? But part of the book is about your brother Rob. And tell us a little bit about the jigsaw puzzle part of it. Why is that on the book?
Well, the jigsaw puzzle kind of tied my brother to Meg. Meg's involvement with cystic fibrosis she had a lot of breathing issues. My brother, in the book, during the course of me writing this book and the course of me being a surrogate, he was dealing with HIV/AIDS, and he had pneumocystis pneumonia. And one part in the book, he was really struggling to breathe in the hospital, and Meg had spent most of her life in and out of hospitals with breathing issues. And she was the one actually who suggested that I get a jigsaw puzzle for my brother during that time, because he could concentrate on the jigsaw puzzle and not concentrate on his breathing, which, anything, when you start concentrating on one thing, you can't do it. So she actually tied the puzzle is what tied the two of them together, and it sort of is a prevailing theme throughout the whole book. We ended up finishing that jigsaw puzzle, and it's hanging in my daughter's room, so it just meant a lot to me. So the puzzle theme sort of is pervasive.
Yeah, I won't actually get into the exact part of the book where that deals with it, but it's a very emotionally wrenching scene where the puzzle was involved. And again, that's one of the themes that goes through this thing. It's not just the surrogacy, there's all these family things going through as well.
No, it really isn't a book about surrogacy. No. I mean, in the end, it's not a book about surrogacy. It's just really a book about life and relationships and friendships and family. And it's not, I mean, the surrogacy is obviously, there, and it's what caused the story, but it's not a book about surrogacy.
It's easy for me as a backseat driver here to kind of look at this thing and go, wow, didn't you see some of the stuff coming up? I mean, for instance, just there's an area of the book where you actually lost the first attempt at having this baby, and I'm sure that was a very emotionally time, and it also was the same time that you were going through the thing with your brother, and there was just so many things going on in terms of that. I guess for people who are reading it, first of all, we're saying to ourselves, okay, are you going to go through with this? You're going to keep going. What made you decide to keep going?
Well, it was funny that you actually brought that up, because I was talking to a friend about that today, and when we were editing it, and Robin Stratton was the editor on this book, as she was on another one of Mike's books.